How's it going, everybody? Today we're going to talk a little bit about O.J. Simpson. Just the other day on Sunday night, they aired this lost confession. It was apparently like an interview he did with this girl after they convinced him to write this book called If I Did It. And in this book, he kind of puts out this hypothetical how it could have happened according to the police and everything, right? He puts it in as an hypothetical. But when you watch the interview, you actually listen to him say it and actually verbalize the hypothetical. I always had a problem with the evidence in the OJ case, and particularly because Mark Fuhrman taints anything he touches because of the horrible racist that he is. But I would have even looked past Mark Fuhrman and his issues in that sense. If there wasn't it's what I heard, it was something like a third of the blood that was collected from OJ was missing, like unaccounted for, was just gone. And so when I hear that, and then I see Mark Fuhrman, and it created reasonable doubt for me. But I always did kind of honestly have to look at it and say, look, OJ had to be there. He had to have been there at some point. And that's going to bring me to what this video is about. This video is about when I was watching OJ talk about his hypothetical. You guys listen to how he kept saying Charlie? He was talking about this Charlie. He talks about it was somebody that he had just met, and all that stuff. And he talks about Charlie took the knife from under the seat, and then he the specific thing that really made me go, oh, wow. The very specific thing is when he says, at that point I reached back and got the knife from Charlie, and he stops. Remember, he's explaining a hypothetical here. And he stops and he goes, I do remember that. OJ, you just confessed, dude. You realize that, right? Because in a hypothetical, he's only talking about he would have only been talking about the evidence that was presented, things that could have been proven as happening, kind of thing, right? So he would be talking about the hypothetical in that sense. There is no evidence given in the case that could speak to what was in his mind. So he can't say that was what was in evidence because nobody could have read his thoughts. So the moment he says, and I remember that, specifically, the way he says that, I mean, it's right there. He just puts the stamp on it. He puts the rubber stamp on it. This is my confession. Which, in the last probably, say, year or so, since I watched a particular documentary about a certain serial killer by the name of Glen Rogers, I had been kind of developing a theory. You can't deny that O.J. Simpson's footprints are tracking blood all around there on Nicole Simpson's little stoop there, leading into her house. And the thing is this guy Glen Rogers was hanging around there at the time. He was in that area. He was, and he was talking to his family back home about how he was hanging out with the Simpsons. Well, he actually said Nicole because he wasn't actually a sports guy, so he didn't even know who OJ was really. funny, but not funny. But he didn't even really know who OJ was. He kind of figured it out later. Oh, he's a football player. Oh, he's OJ. Okay, he realized that other people knew who he was, and he realized that, oh, okay, OJ's a big deal, and he eventually got it, but he didn't get it at first when he first met them. But anyway, interesting story about it. But the thing is, is that I did begin to get to thinking about it, and when OJ was sitting there talking about it, doing his little kind of walkthrough of the hypothetical, which he ends up rubber stamping, as I said, he's talking about Charlie and Charlie this and Charlie that, and Charlie took the knife under the seat. Charlie, da, 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 I got the knife from Charlie. Charlie, I think Charlie was Glenn. I think OJ just doesn't. OJ may not have known his name at the time. Glenn may have been giving him a fake name because Glenn was telling his family that he planned on killing Nicole. He had already a pretty huge body count. He had been just going all over the country. He was just, he just happened to be in California right after the Northridge earthquake, and he was working with an earthquake repair company doing a lot of demo and painting and stuff with that company after the Northridge earthquake. Which was a lot of insurance work and stuff like that. So he, that's why he was around. And so I'm going to show you guys some stuff here. We're going to show you some stuff from the Glen Rogers documentary. I'm going to show you the part of OJ's confession, his, hypothetical, where he talks about Charlie. And then, and like I said, I'm going to show you a few things here. We're also going to hear that there was a witness that saw somebody standing out in front of Nicole's gate, in front of her house, in an angry stance, as he puts it, and that this person was either Caucasian, Hispanic, or Asian. And absolutely was not African American, so that rules out OJ. So that means there was another person there, which makes sense when you find out that there was another set of footprints found. They did see another set of footprints that they had found there, and I believe that if it would have been looked into in a timely fashion back when this was all going on, they might have been able to pin that to Glenn. And that he was there and stuff. So, but the interesting thing about it, I just thought, after listening to his confession and knowing about this serial killer, Glen Rogers, I thought, that's interesting. I think Charlie might be Glenn. So anyways, let me know what you guys think, obviously. But here we go. I'll show you some of what I'm talking about.
12th, 1994. And let's just walk through the night.
Well, first of all, this is very difficult for me to do this. It was very difficult for me because it's hypothetical. I know and I accept the fact that people are going to feel whatever way they're going to feel. They're going to, whatever they want to feel. In the book, the hypothetical is
Charlie pulls that up.
Charlie. This guy Charlie shows up, the guy who I had recently become friends with, and I don't know why you had been by Nicole's house, but it told me you wouldn't believe what's going on over there. And I remember thinking, well, whatever's going on over there has got to stop, right?
Okay, so as you hear him talking about Glenn there, he's talking about how he hadn't known he hadn't known Charlie very long. Charlie was, kind of new to the scene or whatever. Well, that fits with Glenn because Glenn literally showed up after the 1994 Northridge quake. Northridge quake. And he showed up then at that point. He ended up working, like I said, as, like a painter, demo guy kind of thing, whatever, for this company who was doing repairs on earthquake damage and stuff like that. So anyways, this would explain how Charlie could be somebody that was new to the Simpsons and the Browns or whatever. Not everybody would have probably known him yet. It fits because Glenn was such a recent addition. Literally had just shown up in California recently, and so not a lot of people would have known him yet. So, just wanted to point that out.
So we kind of hooked up together, and I'm kind of broad stroking this. We go over. Get in the Bronco and go over.
Let's just go back and do the details. Where did you park?
This is the detail.
You park
in the hypothetical in the alley.
Right. You park in the alley.
Yeah.
And you put on a wool cap and gloves.
In the hypothetical, I put on a cap and gloves.
Right. Yeah. And you reached under the seat for?
A knife. I always kept a knife in the car for the crazies and stuff because you can't travel with a gun. And I remember Charlie saying, "You ain't bringing that." And I didn't, right? But I believe he took it.
Charlie took the knife?
Yeah. In the book.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the back gate, you go through the back gate,
Yes.
and it was open or broken or?
I don't recall.
Okay.
I go to the front and I'm looking to see what's going on. And I can see that it appears like Nicole had candles all the time. She really did, to keep her overhead down, I think. And music was on. And while I was there, a guy shows up. You know?
So Ron Goldman comes in the back gate.
Yeah. You know?
So Ron Goldman comes in the back gate.
Yeah. A guy that I really didn't recognize. I may have seen him around, but I really didn't recognize him to be anyone. And in the mood I was in, I started having words with him.
He says to you, "I just came by to return a pair of glasses. Judy left them at the restaurant."
Yeah, words to that effect, yes.
And
he
was
I don't know if I believed it or didn't believe it. It was pretty much immaterial because, I was more concerned about everything that was going on, and was fed up with it, I guess. And
you get into a fight. Nicole comes out.
A verbal
fight.
Got a little loud, and by that time, Nicole had come out, and we started having words about who is this guy, why is he here, what's going on.
And she says, "This is my house, get the F out of here."
Yes, and which I didn't like because, once again, this is the same person, and if you read the book, you'll see some things that happened in the 2 weeks leading up to this that were very, very irritating, and I think Charlie had followed this guy in, wanted to make sure there was no problem, and he brought the knife. As things got heated, I just remember Nicole fell and hurt herself.
So this is where I think maybe OJ originally kind of went there and saw Charlie, and they started, and Charlie starts telling him about what's going on over at Nicole's or whatever, and so OJ's like, "Oh, okay, I got an ally here," and they maybe go over to intimidate, make a scene, whatever, and I think that's where it gets out of hand. Now, how does it get out of hand? Well, obviously OJ was upset, but OJ had gotten upset in the past without slitting a person's throat ear to ear. He'd gotten upset in the past and hadn't done those types of things. Guess who? His preferred method of killing, especially women. Well, he primarily only killed women, first of all. Charlie or Glen Rogers. He basically, his victims were mostly women, and that was a way that a lot of his victims were killed. Literally ear to ear. I mean, deep gashes. Exactly the same. So, this is why there's a few reasons why I think at least this idea of mine, I think at least warrants a little bit of thought, because seriously, listening to OJ talking about how, Charlie was a new guy in their life, or like he'd just come around recently, it makes sense that Charlie would be the one that would grab, or Glenn would be the one that would grab that knife. I mean, he's just that way. It's just he loves knives. First of all, that's his preferred method of killing is with knives. But he did try a few other things, but mostly he liked knives. And as I said before, that whole ear to ear thing, that was something he did often. So it's another indicator as to, I think why it's possible that Glen Rogers could have been involved here.
And this guy kind of got into a karate thing. And I said, "Well, you think you can kick my ass?" And I remember I grabbed a knife. I do remember that portion, taking a knife from Charlie. And to be honest, after that, I don't remember. Except I'm standing there and there's all kind of stuff around. And
What kind of stuff?
blood and stuff around. I hate to say this, but this is hypothetical. I'm
Right,
sorry.
right.
I know we got to back up again.
Right.
You
It's
know,
okay. I want to
but
back up.
This is hard. This is hard.
I know. I want to back
it's
up
hard
to.
to try to make people think that I'm.
I know. I know. You wrote in the book, I had never seen so much blood in my life.
Yes.
You're covered, the scene. Can you describe it?
It's hard for me to describe it. I'm telling you, I don't think any two people could be murdered the way they were without everybody being covered in blood. And of course, I think we've all seen the grisly pictures after. So yeah, I think everything would have been covered in blood.
And what goes through your mind at a time like that?
I don't know. It's like, what happened?
You write about removing a glove before taking the knife from Charlie.
I had no conscious memory of doing that, but obviously I must have because they found the glove there.
And blacking out. Have you ever blacked out before?
Not to my knowledge.
No.
No.
And
Of course, if something like this would take place in anybody's life, if it were to happen, I would imagine it's something that you would probably automatically have trouble wrapping your mind around it. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
First thoughts. Eve, it's hard for you to even breathe. I've been watching you as you watch this.
I have nothing to say about this. Absolutely nothing.
Chris.
Well, I think he's confessed to murder. I think he's confessed to murder. And if I'd known he said this in 2006, I would not have objected to the release of this video. I don't think that there's any question of his involvement and that he is the person who is wielding the knife. I mean, he may try and describe it as a hypothetical, but of course, it becomes I did this, I felt this, I saw this. This notion of Charlie, I think Charlie is OJ. This is no hypothetical, this is reality.
Judith, who the heck is Charlie?
I don't know who Charlie is. I wanted him to talk. For me to start interrogating him and pushing him, I felt he would get more agitated, and he kept threatening to leave and not to finish the interview, and I really wanted him to stay.
Let's listen again to this disturbing portion of the interview.
I remember I grabbed a knife. I do remember that portion, taking a knife from Charlie. And to be honest, after that, I don't remember, except I'm standing there and there's all kind of stuff around and
What kind of stuff?
blood and stuff around.
All right. So, could Charlie be OJ, like disassociating himself in order to talk about it? Yes, could be. I'll admit, could be. But when you look at all the possibility that Glen was there, and Glen is a old hand, as it were, at this sort of thing. Because you have to consider, OJ, okay, he was not a killer. He became a killer, but he was not a killer previously. Okay? So it's literally his first time. Okay, if you watch anything about killers, any of them out there, serial killers and most of them, they're sloppy at first. They're sloppy. They make a mess of things. They make mistakes. And it's through multiple murders that they end up refining their, whole way that they operate. And that's what Glenn had. Glenn had that. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because OJ, like I said, he was not a killer at that point, until that night. So it's a little bit hard to believe that this novice, as it were, to put it in terms to make it like understandable, OJ would be like a novice, whereas Glenn would be kind of like an expert, right? So it's hard to believe that OJ could, in whatever it is, 6 minutes, have done all this, got away, all the clothes and everything, all that stuff gets gone. Okay? He still manages to go home, take a shower, and gets on a plane and leaves and goes to Chicago. All this happens. They never found the clothes and stuff like that. I know that some people theorize that he like threw it away at the airport and it got, whatever there, and maybe. But if Glenn was there, Glenn could have easily taken all that stuff. And it could and just having two people there alone, just having a second person there to help him, makes it a little bit more plausible that all of these things could have gotten done and happened in 6 minutes, boom, and everybody gets out. So I think that's one more thing that kind of lends a little bit of credence to it. So, but we'll see. We're going to run through now the whole Glen Rogers story. Not the whole story. I cut out the bits that basically pertain to the Browns and the Simpsons. So we'll see that now. Here we go.
And soon he was calling me saying he was hanging out with Hollywood types like Nicole Simpson. In January 1994, an earthquake rocked Los Angeles. About the time the quake hit, my brother Glenn showed up in town.
I was working in Los Angeles at the time. The Northridge earthquake hit earlier that year, and I was working for a company doing earthquake damage.
A few months later, Glenn risked coming back home, even though Ohio police wanted him for questioning.
In 1994, Glenn was living in L.A., and he came back to Hamilton for a visit, and that's why I decided to have a cookout and have my family over. He told me that he'd met this beautiful girl out in California, and her name was Nicole, and said that he'd done work for her in her house, and said that they went out a couple times for drinks. And he said, Sean, my daughter, and her look so much alike. And he said, she's married to this football player. See, he don't know much about sports. And he said, this football player, and he's black. He's famous, but I don't remember his name. He just remembered Nicole.
I'm in my mother's house at this time, and they're already looking for Glenn. The phone rings, and I talked to him, and he asked me, so guess who I'm partying with? Nicole Simpson. Nobody knew who that was. I thought, well, who's that, Bart Simpson's sister? Just joking. He said, no, that's when he told me that was O.J. Simpson's wife. Actually, what he told me, he says, they got money, they're well off, and I'm taking her down.
The body of a woman reported to be Nicole Brown Simpson, ex-wife of football star O.J. Simpson, and a man identified as Ronald Goldman were found early this morning. Further reports from Los Angeles say the case is being treated as a homicide.
And then I saw pictures of her, and I said, that's who Glenn was telling me about.
Detectives from the Los Angeles Police Department sought and obtained a warrant for the arrest of O.J. Simpson, charging him with the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Lyle Goldman.
I read how the L.A. District Attorney charged O.J. with the murders. I believed my brother was involved, but who in the hell was going to listen to me? Meanwhile, investigators for the defense found signs that pointed in Glenn's direction.
This is where the murder happened. Straight across the street was Nicole's place. The most significant witness in the whole case was Tom Lang. Lived down the street. He came up to this corner, started to walk across the street, gave a verbal command to his dog, and he spotted Nicole Simpson. He locked eyes, as his words, he locked eyes with her, and then went that way. He also noticed a man in an angry stance right in front of her gate, and he described that person as either white, Asian, or Hispanic, but definitely not African-American. He saw a white Ford F-350 vehicle parked in the street. It would be my wish to find out who it was that was driving that Ford F-350.
Letters and pay stubs show that Glen was living in Hollywood and working for a company fixing houses and painting across the city. As a painter, Glen had access to a white pickup truck like the one seen at Nicole's place. And there were more clues tying Glen to the murders.
We felt throughout the criminal case and to this day that that killer came from the world of Faye Resnick. Faye Resnick was a friend of Nicole's. Faye Resnick was a drug user, a drug abuser, a drug addict that had gone into treatment. She hung with people from a very dark world.
Glen told me that he had set up Faye Redmond and Nicole Simpson, and they met him at a Van Nuys nightclub. He set them up to rob them. Whether or not he was going to kill them or not, I don't know. He expected just the two girls to be there. But I guess that Ron Goldman showed up. At the time, I had my suspicions, but I didn't know how he did it or if he really was the killer. It'd be years before Glen would say what really happened. This murder was Glen's first big confession to the criminal profiler. Now Glen was ready to come clean on another crime, the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson. Back in 1994, my brother Glen told me he'd met Nicole Simpson, that she was rich, and that he was going to take her down. Just a few days later, a neighbor found the bodies of Ron Goldman and Nicole outside her Brentwood home. While I was thinking Glen had done it, LA prosecutors charged OJ with the crime. The trial began January 24th, 1995. With O.J. Simpson charged with killing his ex-wife and her 25-year-old friend, Ron Goldman. Prosecutors used a range of graphic devices to prove their case.
The animation showed the government's theory that O.J. Simpson came to Bundy, went through the front gate, killed Nicole, then struggled and killed Ron Goldman, and then left out the back gate.
But the prosecution changed their claim on how the victims had been attacked when new evidence was laid out by the coroner.
Dr. Lakshmanan said Nicole's head was slashed. She was banged against the wall and knocked unconscious. At that point, the prosecutor revealed a new theory. The murderer left Nicole and killed Ron Goldman, then came back for what is described as the coup de grace.
Well, when we first saw it, it presented O.J. Simpson as the murderer, sole murderer, in this alcove. It just didn't fit. By that time, we'd come up with the fact that there had to be more than one person.
After 8 months of evidence and 3 hours of deliberation, the trial of the century ended October 3rd, 1995.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson.
When did you kill those women? How many people did you kill? Did you kill him, Glen?
6 weeks after O.J. was found not guilty, the law caught up with Glen. It wasn't long before my brother was dropping hints about his past crimes.
First time I heard about Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman's murder, I was in my office in Van Nuys and really thought nothing more about it. One day I did receive some letters from a prison inmate indicating that Glen Rogers had written to him that he had met Nicole Brown Simpson, and the inference was, and you know what else? We forwarded it immediately to the O.J. Simpson prosecutors.
Authorities ignored clues leading to my brother, and it would be years before Glen came back to that story. Glen wasn't going to drop hints and letters this time. My brother had learned a new trick during his years on death row: how to paint.
These are pictures that Glen Rogers actually drew in his cell at various times during our correspondence.
Glen was even able to paint the demons he believes have lived inside him all his life.
Glen had explained to me the meaning of this piece. Basically, what you see here is two bottomless abysses, and this is the evil within him looking into the deep abyss and seeing two huge tunnels leading down into hell.
At first, Glen drew what took over his mind when crimes occurred. Then my brother started drawing hints about the blood he had shed.
At this stage of our relationship, Glen starts to include clues and/or names and/or places that he knows I will find in a certain amount of time.
In June 2011, Glen sent the criminal profiler a clue that linked him to the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman.
Here you see R-O-N, and on this tombstone, you see the letters N-I-C-O-L-E. His admission of his involvement in the Ronald Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson murders.
After getting many letters and paintings, the criminal profiler wanted to confront my brother in person to get the evidence he needed. He paid a visit to Florida's Union Correctional Institution. Finally, years after the murder, Glen was ready to tell his side of the story.
Department of Corrections puts out what they called cold case homicide cards. We would grab different games and talk for 6 hours a visit. After I asked him that he had not sent me any specific information regarding his involvement in the O.J. Simpson case, he said, I had, you just didn't pay attention to the clues. I challenged Glen to prove that he had actually committed the murders, that only the killer would know what the actual murder weapon looked like. And so Glen drew this specific weapon.
Now, Glen added a twist that he never told me. A husband's anger over a high-dollar gift that had been kept by his ex-wife was behind it all. Glen told the criminal profiler he was paid to steal back Nicole's diamonds.
Can you show me a set of earrings that would cost approximately $20,000 about 20 years ago? O.J. Simpson allegedly hired Glen Rogers to get into the house of Nicole Brown Simpson and get a pair of earrings. Essentially, his belief was that they were worth $20,000. Glen told me that O.J.'s instructions were that you may have to kill the bitch. Those were his exact words. Glen Rogers explained to me that he had parked his white pickup truck, a Ford pickup truck, on a side street right by the side of the condo. He explained that O.J. knew
of a spare set of keys in the rear of the condo. The idea was that actually the murder would take place inside the home. Once Glen got the keys, he then crouched down just past the front of the gate. At that moment is when Ronald Goldman walks through the front gate. Glen Rogers realized that Ronald Goldman suddenly became an obstacle that needed to be dealt with. He struck him with a large knife, incapacitating him, and threw him against the tree. It was not something that I had expected Rodgers to say. He said that upon her entering into the fray, he stabbed Nicole Brown Simpson once, and she fainted. He charged Goldman and pushing him against the tree, where he later was found deceased. He said that he pulled her hair back to expose her neck and pulled the knife once to sever her neck, to kill her instantly.
OJ, anything you can tell us?
OJ didn't want to, quote, get his hands dirty, per se, in the crimes. He was essentially going to check on Glen's work.
If Glen's story was true, there had to be something at the crime scene to show he'd been there. And sure enough, evidence came out in the Simpson trial that 2 men were there. Shoe prints spelled out a story in blood.
And the Lorenzo.
FBI agent William Bodziak went halfway around the world to find these expensive Italian shoes he said are similar to the ones that could have been worn by O.J. Simpson to commit the murders. Bodziak examined the bloody footprints found on the walkway outside Nicole Brown Simpson's condo. They matched the soles on the exclusive Bruno Malley shoes, he said, and the size of Simpson's tennis shoes are a perfect fit.
But the shoe prints that looked like OJ's weren't the only ones there.
It's possible to identify here a design that resembles a shoe. Yes.
Nationally known forensic scientist Henry Lee identified a second set of shoe prints, what could be a mystery murderer.
By the time OJ had gotten there, 2 people had bled significantly onto the sidewalk.
If O.J. Simpson told me I did it, I would want to know how. You got to explain to me how you did this in less than 6 minutes and got rid of the weapon, the clothes, the bloody clothes. How did you do this? Impossible.
I'm absolutely certain that my brother Glen killed Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman.
I know my brother did it because I've seen proof that he was there.
Somber members of the Brown family attended a candlelight vigil marking the first anniversary of the death of Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman on June 12, 1994. Family members wore angel pins in memory of Nicole, who had collected angel jewelry before her death.
I remember the pin. Mom said Glen sent it to her. And when she went to trial, he wanted her to wear it.
In 2010, I'd got another letter from Glen, and this is what it says.
At my trial,
Mom has on that black vest top, and pinned to it is a gold angel with a diamond in its hand. I sent that to Mom the day after the situation in Brentwood. It's something everyone missed. I believe that that angel pin is absolute proof that Glen killed Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. The same pendant taken off her body. The same pendant that my mom wore on her vest into the courtroom in Hillsborough County Jail.
"18 months after he was captured, a Florida judge sentenced Glen to death
So, as I said, folks, after listening to OJ talk about his hypothetical confession and the way he describes Charlie and all that stuff, I think Glen really fits the bill. I really do. And I think it's a possibility. I'm not saying it's a surefire, 100%, but I think that there's a considerable, coincidence in time there. There's a lot of reasons. But also add to that the fact that an eyewitness saw somebody who was not an African American, who was either Caucasian, Hispanic, or Asian, standing in an angry stance outside of Nicole's gate. And then we have, and also saw this Ford F-350 or Ford truck. We know that Glen, for his job, was driving a truck like that at the time. Then we have the obviously there's the art he did where he puts their names on a tombstone or whatever, Ron and Nicole's name on a tombstone. But then there's that thing with that angel pendant. Okay, you clearly saw that when they were having the memorial for Nicole Brown Simpson a year after her death, everybody gathered and they were all wearing, it said clearly that they were all wearing the angel, little pendants or whatever it was they were wearing of angels, because Nicole Brown Simpson was collecting that sort of stuff before her death. And Glen sends a little angel pendant thing to his mother and basically makes a big deal about her wearing it at his trial. Look, it's not proof. It's not 100% proof, but doesn't it make you wonder? Makes me wonder. Anyways, regardless, I think the takeaway from OJ's confession, though, is I think OJ confessed. I think he actually kind of confessed there, because I can't see any reason why, when he's in the middle of a hypothetical, that he would say, and I do remember that. Wait, you remember that? You were there? Really? Yeah. So, anyways, thought I'd share my reasoning with everybody else here. If you agree with me, great. If you don't, whatever. Anyways, if you haven't already, please hit subscribe. We'll see you later.